welcome to Be Storytelling.
Why'd you do that?
How are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story.
Merry Christmas.
And also, your neck is solid.
Jack is asleep.
But
That's okay.
we are going to be reading
The Bible.
the Bible. Then we are going to be reading Ben-Hur. What are we reading in the Bible?
We are, as you know, we're taking a break from the book of Judges just for yesterday and today. And I thought about reading, I know yesterday we read from the book of Matthew. I thought about reading from the book of Luke today. But instead, because for brevity's sake, and because I want to get through a giant portion of Ben-Hur today so that we can finish book 4 tomorrow, we're going to read from the book of John and just the first 18 verses. So, and this is a Christmas message if there ever was one. Here it is. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God who is at the Father's side. He has made him known." That is the end of John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. And tomorrow we'll pick up on Judges once again. So, am I on the Heavy D storytelling site? I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I can't tell here. Okay. So, we're going to very quickly, I'm going to give the synopsis today. Here's what happened. Ben-Hur was talking to Malach, who is the guy that Simonides has sent to spy on him and make sure that he is who he says he is. Malach and him were talking, and they were talking while they were riding their camels to go to the Sheikh Ilderim's house, or his tent, that's kind of, I guess, out in the middle of nowhere a little bit. But definitely away from the city where they were. It's 1 hour by camel or 2 by horse. And so they were talking, and they were talking about the Egyptian dude whose name is Balthazar, and that this guy had seen the Christ, and that he came to the birth and worshipped Jesus, and that was during the reign of Herod and all that stuff. So that's basically what happened in the last chapter. We cut it short because it was Christmas Eve. I want to try to cover 3 chapters today, and then I think tomorrow we can finish book 4. So, this is chapter 11. What time the lower horn of the noon moon touched the castellated piles on Mount Sulpius, and 2/3 of the people of Antioch were out on their housetops comforting themselves with the night breeze when it blew, and with fans when it failed, Simonides sat in the chair which had come to be part of him, and from the terrace looked down over the river, and his ships a-swing at their moorings. By the way, the name of this chapter is The Wise Servant and His Daughter. The wall at his back cast its shadow broadly over the water to the opposite shore. Above him the endless tramp upon the bridge went on. Esther was holding a plate for him containing his frugal supper, some wheaten cakes, light as wafers, some honey, and a bowl of milk, into which he now and then dipped the wafers after dipping them into honey. Malak is a laggard tonight, he said, showing where his thoughts were. Do you believe he will come? Esther asked. Unless he has taken to the sea or the desert, and is yet following on, he will come. Simonides spoke with quiet confidence. He may write, she said. Not so, Esther. He would have dispatched a letter when he found he could not return, and told me so. Because I have not received such a letter, I know he can come and will. I hope so, she said very softly. Something in the utterance attracted his attention. It might have been the tone. It might have been the wish. The smallest bird cannot light upon the greatest tree without sending a shock to its most distant fiber. Every mind is at times no less sensitive to the most trifling words. You wish him to come, Esther? He asked. Yes, she said, lifting her eyes to his. Why? Can you tell me? He persisted. Because, she hesitated, and then began again. Because the young man is... The stop was full. Our master. Is that the word? Yes. And you still think I should not suffer him to go away without telling him to come, if he chooses, and take us, and all we have, all, Esther, the goods, the shekels, the ships, the slaves, all the mighty credit which is a mantle of cloth of gold and finest silver spun for me by the greatest of the angels of men. Success. She made no answer. Does that move you? Nothing? No? He said, with the slightest taint of bitterness. Well, well, I have found, Esther, the worst reality is never unendurable when it comes out from behind the clouds through which we at first see it darkly. Never. Not even the rack. I suppose it will be so with death. And by that philosophy, the slavery to which we are going must afterwhile become sweet. It pleases me even now to think what a favored man our master is. The fortune costs him nothing, not an anxiety, not a drop of sweat, not so much as a thought. It attaches to him undreamed of, and in his youth. And, Esther, let me waste a little vanity with the reflection, he gets what he could not go into the market and buy with all the pelf in the sum. Thee, my child, my darling, thou blossom from the tomb of my lost Rachel. He drew her to him and kissed her twice, once for herself, once for her mother. Say it not so, she said, when his hand fell from her neck. Let us think better of him. He knows what sorrow is, and will set us free. Ah, thy instincts are fine, Esther, and thou knowest I lean upon them in doubtful cases, where good or bad is to be pronounced of a person standing before thee as he stood this morning. But, his voice rose and hardened, these limbs upon which I cannot stand, this body drawn and beaten out of human shape, they are not all I bring him of myself. Oh, no, no. I bring him a soul which has triumphed over torture and Roman malice keener than any torture. I bring him a mind which has eyes to see gold at a distance farther than the ships of Solomon sailed, and power to bring it to hand. Aye, Esther, into my palm here, for the fingers to grip and keep, lest it take wings and some other's word, a mind skilled at scheming. He stopped and laughed. Why, Esther, before the new moon, which in the courts of the temple on the holy hill they are at this moment celebrating, passes into its next quartering, I could ring the world so as to startle even Caesar. For you know, child, I have that faculty which is better than any one sense, better than a perfect body, better than courage and will, better than experience, ordinarily the best product of the longest lives, the faculty divinest of men, but which... He stopped and laughed again, not bitterly, but with real zest. But which even the great do not sufficiently account, while with the herd it is non-existent, the faculty of drawing men to my purpose and holding them faithfully to its achievement, by which, as against things to be done, I multiply myself into hundreds and thousands, so the captains of my ships plough the seas, and bring me honest returns, so Malach follows the youth, our master, and will. Just then a footstep was heard upon the terrace. Ha, Esther, said I not so? Here he is, and he will have tidings. For thy sake, sweet child, my lily just budded, I pray the Lord God, who has not forgotten his wandering sheep of Israel, that they be good and comforting. Now we will know if he will let thee go with all thy beauty, and me with all my faculties. Malach came to the chair. Peace to you, good master, he said, with a low obeisance. And to you, Esther, most excellent of daughters. He stood before them deferentially, and the altitude and the address left it difficult to define his relation to them. The one was that of a servant, the other indicated the familiar and friend. On the other side, Simonides, as was his habit in business, after answering the salutation, went straight to the subject. What of the young man, Malach? The events of the day were told quietly and in the simplest words, and until he was through there was no interruption, nor did the listener in the chair so much as move a hand during the narration, but for his eyes, wide open and bright, and an occasional long-drawn breath, he might have been accounted an effigy. Thank you, Malach, he said heartily at the conclusion. You have done well. No one could have done better. Now, what you say of the young man's nationality? He is an Israelite, good master, and of the tribe of Judah. You are positive? Very positive. He appears to have told you but little of his life. He has somewhere learned to be prudent. I might call him distrustful. He baffled all my attempts upon his confidence until we started from the Castalian fount, going to the village of Daphne. A place of abomination! Why went he there? I would say from curiosity, the first motive of the many who go, but very strangely, he took no interest in the things he saw. Of the temple he merely asked if it were Grecian. Good master, the young man has a trouble of mind from which he would hide, and he went to the grove, I think, as we go to sepulchres with our dead. He went to bury it. That were well, if so, Simonides said in a low voice, then louder. Malach, the curse of the time is prodigality. The poor make themselves poorer as apes of the rich, and the merely rich carry themselves like princes. Saw you signs of the weakness in the youth? Did he display moneys, coin of Rome or Israel? None, good master. Surely, Malach, where there are so many inducements to folly, to eat and drink, surely he made you generous offer of some sort. His age, if nothing more, would warrant that much. He neither ate nor drank in my company. In what he said or did, Malach, could you in any wise detect his master's idea? You know they peep through cracks close enough to stop the wind. Give me to understand you, said Malach in doubt. Well, You know, we nor speak nor act, much less decide grave questions concerning ourselves, except as we be driven by a motive. In that respect, what made you of him? As to that, Master Simonides, I can answer with much assurance. He is devoted to finding his mother and sister, that first. Then he has a grievance against Rome, and as the Messala of whom I told you had something to do with the wrong, the great present object is to humiliate him. The meeting at the fountain furnished an opportunity, but it was put aside as not sufficiently public. The Messala is influential, said Simonides thoughtfully. Yes, but the next meeting will be in the circus. Well, and then? The son of Arius will win. How know you? Malik smiled. I am judging by what he says. Is that all? No. There is a much better sign, his spirit. Ah, but Malik, his idea of vengeance, what is its scope? Does he limit it to the few who did him the wrong, or does he take in the many? And more, is his feeling but the vagary of the sensitive boy, or has it the full seasoning of suffering manhood to give it endurance? You know, Malik, the vengeful thought that has root merely in the mind is but a dream of idlest sort, which one clear day will dissipate, while revenge, the passion, is a disease of the heart which climbs up to the brain, and feeds itself on both alike. In this question, Simonides for the first time showed signs of feeling. He spoke with rapid utterance and with clenched hands, and the eagerness of a man illustrating the disease he described. Good, my master, Malik replied. One of my reasons for believing the young man a Jew is the intensity of his hate. It was plain to me he had himself under watch, as was natural, seeing how long he has lived in an atmosphere of Roman jealousy. Yet I saw it blaze once when he wanted to know Ilderim's feeling towards Rome, and again when I told him the story of the sheik and the wise man, and spoke of the question, where is he that is born king of the Jews? Simonides leaned forward quickly. Ah, Malik, his words, give me his words. Let me judge the impression the mystery made upon him. He wanted to know the exact words. Were they to be or born to be? It appeared he was struck by the seeming difference in the effect of the two phrases. Simonides settled back into his pose of listening judge. Then, said Malik, I told him Ilderim's view of the mystery, that the king would come with the doom of Rome. The young man's blood rose over his cheeks and forehead, and he said earnestly, who but a Herod can be king while Rome endures? Meaning what? That the empire must be destroyed before there could be another rule. Simonides gazed for a time at the ships and their shadows slowly swinging together in the river. When he looked up, it was to end the interview. Enough, Malik, he said. Get you to eat and make ready to return to the Orchard of Palms. You must help the young man in his coming trial. Come to me in the morning. I will send a letter to Ilderim. Then, in an undertone, as if to himself, he added, I may attend the circus myself. When Malik, after the customary benediction given and received, was gone, Simonides took a deep draught of milk, and seemed refreshed and easy of mind. Put the meal down, Esther, he said. It is over. She obeyed. Here now, she resumed her place upon the arm of the chair close to him. God is good to me, very good, he said fervently. His habit is to move in mystery, yet sometimes he permits us to think we see and understand him. I am old, dear, and must go, but now, in this 11th hour, when my hope was beginning to die, he sends me this one with a promise, and I am lifted up. I see the way to a great part in a circumstance itself so great that it shall be as a new birth to the whole world. and I see a reason for the gift of my great riches, and the end for which they were designed. Verily, my child, I take hold on life anew." Esther nestled closer to him, as if to bring his thoughts from the far flying. "The king has been born," he continued, imagining he was still speaking to her, "and he must be near the half of common life. Balthazar says he was a child on his mother's lap when he saw him, and gave him presents and worship, and Ilderim holds it was 27 years ago last December when Balthazar and his companions came to his tent asking a hiding place from Herod. Wherefore the coming cannot now be long delayed. Tonight, tomorrow it may be. Holy fathers of Israel, what happiness in the thought! I seem to hear the crash of the falling of old walls and the clamor of a universal change. Aye, and for the uttermost joy of men, the earth opens to take Rome in, and they look up and laugh and sing that she is not where while we are." Then he laughed at himself. "Why, Esther, heard you ever the like? Surely I have on me the passion of a singer, the heart of blood, and the thrill of Miriam and David. In my thoughts, which should be those of a plain worker in figures and facts, there is a confusion of cymbals clashing and harp strings loud beaten, and the voices of a multitude standing around a new risen throne. I will put the thinking by for the present. Only, dear, when the king comes, he will need money and men, for as he was a child born of woman, he will be but a man after all, bound to human ways, as you and I are. And for the money he will have need of getters and keepers, and for the men leaders. There! See you not a broad road for my walking, and the running of the youth our master? And at the end of it, glory and revenge for us both. And he paused, struck with the selfishness of a scheme in which she had no part or good result. Then adding, kissing her, "and happiness for thy mother's child." She sat still, saying nothing. Then he remembered the difference in natures, and the law by which we are not permitted always to take delight in the same cause, or be equally afraid of the same thing. He remembered she was but a girl. "Of what are you thinking, Esther?" he said in his common homelike way. "If the thought have the form of a wish, give it me, little one, while the power remains mine. For power, you know, is a fretful thing, and hath its wings always spread for flight." She answered with a simplicity almost childish. "Send for him, father. Send for him tonight, and do not let him go into the circus." "Ah," he said, prolonging the exclamation, and again his eyes fell upon the river, where the shadows were more shadowy than ever since the moon had sunk far down behind Sulpice, leaving the city to the ineffectual stars. Shall we say it, reader? He was touched by a twinge of jealousy. If she should really love the young master, oh no, that could not be. She was too young. But the idea had fast grip, and directly held him still and cold. She was 16. He knew it well. On the last natal day he had gone with her to the shipyard, where there was a launch, and the yellow flag which the galley bore to its bridle with the waves had on it Esther. So they celebrated the day together. Yet the fact struck him now with the force of a surprise. There are realizations which come to us, all painfully, mostly, however, such as pertain to ourselves, that we are growing old, for instance, and more terrible, that we must die. Such a one crept into his heart, shadowy as the shadows, yet substantial enough to wring from him a sigh which was almost a groan. It was not sufficient that she should enter upon her young womanhood a servant, but she must carry to her master her affections, the truth and tenderness and delicacy of which he, the father, so well knew, because to this time they had all been his own undividedly. The fiend, whose task it is to torture us with fears and bitter thoughts, seldom does his work by halves. In the pang of the moment, the brave old man lost sight of his new scheme and of the miraculous king, its subject. By a mighty effort, however, he controlled himself and asked calmly, "Not go into the circus, Esther? Why, child?" "It is not a place for a son of Israel, father." Rabbinical, Esther, is that all?" The tone of the inquiry was searching, and went to her heart, which began to beat loudly, so loudly she could not answer. A confusion new and strangely pleasant fell upon her. "The young man is to have the fortune," he said, taking her hand and speaking more tenderly. "He is to have the ships and the shekels, all, Esther, all. Yet I did not feel poor, for thou wert left me, and thy love so like the dead Rachel's. Tell me, is he to have that too?" She bent over him and laid her cheek against his head. "Speak, Esther. I will be the stronger of the knowledge. In warning there is strength." She sat up then, and spoke as if she were truth's holy self. "Comfort thee, father. I will never leave thee. Though he take my love, I will be thy handmaid ever as now." And stooping, she kissed him. "And more," she said, continuing, "he is comely in my sight, and the pleading of his voice drew me to him, and I shudder to think of him in danger. Yes, father, I would be more than glad to see him again. Still, the love that is unrequited cannot be perfect love. Wherefore I will wait a time, remembering I am thy daughter and my mother's." "A very blessing of the Lord art thou, Esther, a blessing to keep me rich, though all else be lost. And by his holy name and everlasting life, I swear thou shalt not suffer." At his request, a little later, the servant came and rolled the chair into the room, where he sat for a time thinking of the coming of the king, while she went off and slept the sleep of the innocent. Chapter 12. A Roman Orgy. The palace across the river, nearly opposite Simonides' place, is said to have been completed by the famous Epiphanes, and was all such a habitation can be imagined, though he was a builder whose taste ran to the immense rather than the classical, now so-called an architectural imitator, in other words, of the Persians instead of the Greeks. The wall enclosing the whole island to the water's edge, and built for the double purpose of bulwark against the river and defense against the mob, was said to have rendered the palace unfit for constant occupancy, insomuch that the legates abandoned it and moved to another residence erected for them on the western ridge of Mount Sulphius, under the temple of Jupiter. Persons were not wanting, however, who flatly denied the bill against the ancient abode. They said, with shrewdness at least, that the real object of the removal of the legates was not a more healthful locality, but the assurance afforded them by a huge barracks, named, according to the prevalent style, citadel, situated just over the way on the eastern ridge of the mount, and the opinion had plausible showing. Among other pertinent things, it was remarked that the palace was kept in perpetual readiness for use, and when a consul general of the army, king, or visiting potentate of any kind arrived at Antioch, quarters were at once assigned to him on the island. As we have to do with but one apartment in the old pile, the residue of it is left to the reader's fancy, and as pleases him. He may go through its gardens, baths, halls, and labyrinth of rooms to the pavilions on the roof, all furnished as became a house of fame in a city which was more nearly Milton's gorgeous East than any other in the world. At this age, the apartment alluded to would be termed a salon. It was quite spacious, floored with polished marble slabs, and lighted in the day by skylights in which colored mica served as glass. The walls were broken by Atlantis, no two of which were alike, but all supporting a cornice wrought with arabesques exceedingly intricate in form, and more elegant on account of superadditions of color, blue, green, Tyrian purple, and gold. Around the room ran a continuous divan of Indian silks and wool of cashmere. The furniture consisted of tables and stools of Egyptian patterns grotesquely carved. We have left Simonides in his chair, perfecting his scheme, in aid of the miraculous king, whose coming he has decided is so close at hand. Esther is asleep, and now, having crossed the river by the bridge and made way through the lion-guarded gate and a number of Babylonian halls and courts, let us enter the gilded salon. There are 5 chandeliers hanging by sliding bronze chains from the ceiling, one in each corner, and in the center one, enormous pyramids of lighted lamps illuminating even the demonic faces of the Atlantes and the complex tracery of the cornice. About the table, seated or standing or moving restlessly from one to the other, there are probably 100 persons whom we must study at least for a moment. They are all young, some of them not more than boys. That they are Italians and mostly Romans is past doubt. They all speak Latin in purity, while each one appears in the indoor dress of the great capital on the Tiber, that is, in tunics short of sleeve and skirt, a style of vesture well adapted to the climate of Antioch, and especially comfortable in the too close atmosphere of the salon. On the divan, here and there, togas and lacern lie where they have been carelessly tossed, some of them significantly bordered with purple. On the divan also lie sleepers stretched at ease, whether they were overcome by the heat and fatigue of the sultry day or by Bacchus, we will not pause to inquire. The hum of voices is loud and incessant. Sometimes there is an explosion of laughter, sometimes a burst of rage or exultation, but over all prevails a sharp, prolonged rattle, at first somewhat confusing to the non-familiar. If we approach the tables, however, the mystery solves itself. The company is at the favorite games, draughts and dice, singly or together, and the rattle is merely of the tessera, or ivory cubes, loudly shaken, and the moving of the hosts on the checkered boards. Who are the company? Good Flavius, said a player, holding his piece in suspended movement, thou seest yon lacerna, that one in front of us on the divan. It is fresh from the shop, and hath a shoulder buckle of gold broad as a palm. Well, said Flavius, intent upon his game, I have seen such before, wherefore mine may not be old, yet by the girdle of Venus it is not new. What of it? Nothing. Only I would give it to find a man who knows everything. Ha ha! For something cheaper I would find thee here several with purple, who will take thy offer. But play. There, check. So by all the Jupiters. Now, what sayest thou again? Be it so. And the wager? A sestertium. Then each drew his tablets and stylus, and made a memorandum, and while they were resetting the pieces, Flavius returned to his friend's remark. It always interests me whenever they have modern terms that are written, obviously, well over 100 years before we had modern tablets and styluses. But yet, here's a tablet and a stylus written in a book that was published in the 1880s about about ancient Rome. So that's always kind of interesting. A man who knows everything, Hercle, the oracles would die. What wouldst thou with such a monster? Answer to one question, my Flavius, then propole. I would cut his throat. And the question? I would have him tell the hour. Hour, said I. Nay, the minute. Maxentius will arrive tomorrow. Good play, I have you. And why the minute? Hast thou ever stood uncovered in the Syrian sun on the quay at which he will land? The fires of the Vesta are not so hot, and by the stature of our father Romulus, I would die, if die I must, in Rome. Avernus is here, there, in the square before the Forum. I could stand, and with thy hand raised thus, touch the floor of the gods. Ha! By Venus, my Flavius, thou didst beguile me. I have lost, O fortune. Again, I must have back my sestertium. Be it so. So he lost, and he's playing again because he's got to get his money back. Be it so. And they played again, and when day, stealing through the skylights, began to dim the lamps, it found the two in the same places at the same table, still at the game. Like most of the company, they were military attachés of the consul, awaiting his arrival and amusing themselves meantime. During this conversation, a party entered the room and, unnoticed at first, proceeded to the central table. The signs were that they had come from a revel just dismissed. Some of them kept their feet with difficulty. Around the leader's brow was a chapelet which marked him master of the feast, if not the giver. The wine had made no impression upon him, unless to heighten his beauty, which was of the most manly Roman style. He carried his head high raised. The blood flushed his lips and cheeks brightly. His eyes glittered, though the manner in which, shrouded in a toga spotlessly white and of ample folds, he walked was too nearly imperial for one sober and not a Caesar. In going to the table, he made room for himself and his followers with little ceremony and no apologies, and when at length he stopped and looked over it and at the players, they all turned to him with a shout, like a cheer. Messala! Messala! They cried. Those in distant quarters, hearing the cry, re-echoed it where they were. Instantly there were dissolutions of groups and breaking up of games, and a general rush toward the center. Messala took the demonstration indifferently and proceeded presently to show the ground of his popularity. A health to thee, Drusus, my friend, he said to the player next at his right. A health, and thy tablets a moment. He raised the waxen boards, glanced at the memoranda of wagers, and tossed them down. Denarii, only denarii, coin of cartmen and butchers, he said, with a scornful laugh. By the drunken simile, to what is Rome coming, when a Caesar sits a nights awaiting a turn of fortune to bring him but a beggarly denarius? The scion of the Drusi reddened to his brows, but the bystanders broke in upon his reply by surging closer around the table and shouting, "The Messala! The Messala!" Men of the Tiber, Messala continued. That's the river that Rome is on, by the way. Men of the Tiber, Messala continued, wresting a box with the dice in it from a hand nearby. Who is he most favored of the gods? A Roman? Who is he lawgiver of the nations? A Roman. Who is he by sword right, the universal master? The company were of the easily inspired, and the thought was one to which they were born. In a twinkling they snatched the answer from him. A Roman! A Roman! They shouted. Yet, he lingered to catch their ears, yet there is a better than the best of Rome. He tossed his patrician head and paused as if to sting them with his sneer. Hear ye, he asked, there is a better than the best of Rome. Aye, Hercules, cried one. Bacchus! Yelled a satirist. Jove! Jove! Thundered the crowd. No, Messala answered him. Among men! Name him! Name him! They demanded. I will, he said, the next lull. He who to the perfection of Rome hath added the perfection of the East, who to the arm of conquest, which is Western, hath also the art needful to the enjoyment of dominion, which is Eastern. Purple! His best is a Roman after all, someone shouted, and there was a great laugh and long clapping of hands, an admission that Messala had the advantage. In the East, he continued, we have no gods, only wine, women, and fortune. And the greatest of them is fortune. Wherefore our motto, who dareth what I dare, fit for the Senate, fit for battle, fittest for him who, seeking the best, challenges the worst. His voice dropped into an easy, familiar tone, but without relaxing the ascendancy he had gained. In the great chest up in the citadel I have 5 talents, coin current in the markets, and here are the receipts for them. From his tunic he drew a roll of paper, and, flinging it on the table, continued amidst breathless silence, every eye having him in view, fixed on his, every ear listening. The sum lies there, the measure of what I dare. Who of you dares so much? You are silent. Is it too great? I will strike off 1 talent. What? Still silent? Come then. Throw me once for these 3 talents. Only 3. For 2. For 1. 1 at least. 1 for the honor of the river by which you were born. Rome, east, against Rome, west. Orontes, the barbarous, against Tiber, the sacred. He rattled the dice overhead while waiting. The Orontes against the Tiber, he repeated, with an increase of scornful emphasis. Not a man moved. Then he flung the box upon the table, and laughing, he took up the receipts. Ha ha ha! By the Olympian Jove, I know now ye have for fortunes to make or to mend. Therefore, are ye come to Antioch? Ho, Cecilius! Here, Messala, cried a man behind him. Here I am, perishing in the mob and begging a drachma to settle with the ragged ferryman. But, Pluto take me, these new ones have not so much as an obulus among them. The sally provoked a burst of laughter, under which the salon rang and rang again. Messala alone kept his gravity. Go thou, he said to Cecilius, to the chamber whence we came, and bid the servants bring the amphorae here, and the cups and goblets, if those our countrymen looking for fortune have not purses. By the Syrian Bacchus, I will see if they are not better blessed with stomachs. Haste thee. Then he turned to Drusus, with a laugh heard throughout the apartment. Ha ha, my friend! Be thou not offended because I levelled the Caesar in thee down to the denarii. Thou seest I did but use the name to try these fine fledglings of our old Rome. Come, my Drusus, come! He took up the box again and rattled the dice merrily. Here, for what sum thou wilt, let us measure fortunes. The manner was frank, cordial, winsome. Drusus melted in a moment. By the nymph, yes, he said, laughing. I will throw with thee, Messala, for a denarius. A very boyish person was looking over the table, watching the scene. Suddenly Messala turned to him. Who art thou? He asked. The lad drew back. Nay, by Castor, and his brother too, I meant not offence. It is a rule among men in matters other than dice to keep the record closest when the deal is least. I have need of a clerk. Wilt thou serve me? The young fellow drew his tablets ready to keep the score. The manner was irresistible. Hold, Messala, hold, cried Drusus. I know not if it be ominous to stay the poised dice with a question, but one occurs to me, and I must ask it, though Venus slap me with her girdle. Nay, my Drusus, Venus with her girdle off is Venus in love. To thy question I will make the throw and hold it against mischance. Thus he turned the box upon the table and held it firmly over the dice. And Drusus asked, Did you ever see one Quintus Arrius? The Doomvir? No, his son. I knew not he had a son. Well, it is nothing, Drusus added indifferently, only my Messala, Pollux was not more like Castor than Arrius is like thee. The remark had the effect of a signal. 20 voices took it up. True, true! His eyes, his face, they cried. What? Answered one, disgusted. Messala is a Roman. Arrius is a Jew. Thou sayest right, a third exclaimed. He is a Jew, or Momus lent his mother the wrong mask. There was a promise of a dispute, seeing which Messala interposed. The wine is not come, my Drusus, and, as thou seest, I have the freckled Pythians as they were dogs in leash. As to Arrius, I will accept thy opinion of him, so thou tell me more about him. Well, be he Jew or Roman, and by the great god Pan, I say it not in disrespect of thy feelings, my Messala, this Arrius is handsome and brave and shrewd. The emperor offered him favor and patronage, which he refused. He came up through mystery, and keepeth distance, as if he felt himself better, or knew himself worse than the rest of us. In the palaestra he was unmatched. He played with the blue-eyed giants from the Rhine, and the hornless bulls of Sarmatia, and they were will-o'-wisps. The Doomvir left him vastly rich. He has a passion for arms, and thinks of nothing but war. Maxentius admitted him into his family, and he was to have taken ship with us, but we lost him at Ravenna. Nevertheless, he arrived safely. We heard of him this morning. Perpole! Instead of coming to the palace or going to the citadel, he dropped his baggage at the Khan, and hath disappeared again. At the beginning of the speech, Messala listened with polite indifference as it proceeded. He became more attentive. At the conclusion, he took his hand from the dice-box and called out, Ho, my Caius! Dost thou hear? A youth at his elbow, his Myrtilus or comrade in the day's chariot practice, answered, much pleased with the attention. Did I not, my Messala? I were not thy friend. Dost thou remember the man who gave thee the fall today? By the lovelocks of Bacchus, have I not a bruised shoulder to help me keep it in mind? And he seconded the words with a shrug that submerged his ears. Well, be thou grateful to the fates. I have found thy enemy. Listen. Thereupon Messala turned to Drusus. Tell us more of him, Perpole, of him who is both Jew and Roman, by Phobus, a combination to make a centaur lovely. What garments doth he affect, my Drusus? Those of the Jews. Hearest thou, Caius? Said Messala. The fellow is young one. He hath the visage of a Roman. 2. He loveth best the garb of a Jew. 3. And in the palaestra fame and fortune come of arms to throw a horse or tilt a chariot, as the necessity may order. 4. And Drusus, help thou my friend again. Doubtless this Arrius hath tricks of language, otherwise he could not so confound himself. Today a Jew, tomorrow a Roman, but of the rich tongue of Athena discourseth he in that as well? With much purity, Messala, he might have been a contestant in the Isthmia. Art thou listening, Caius? Said Messala. The fellow is qualified to salute a woman. For that matter, Aristomache herself, in the Greek, and as I keep the count, that is 5. What sayest thou? Thou hast found him, my Messala, Caius answered, or I am not myself. Thy pardon, Drusus, and pardon of all for speaking in riddles thus, Messala said in his winsome way. By all the decent gods, I would not strain thy courtesy to the point of breaking, but now help thou me, see? He put his hand on the dice box again, laughing. See how close I hold the Pythias and their secret. Thou didst speak, I think, of mystery in connection with the coming of the son of Ares. Tell me of that. 'Tis nothing, Messala, nothing, Drusus replied. A child's story. When Ares, the father, sailed in pursuit of the pirates, he was without wife or family. He returned with a boy, him of whom we speak, and next day adopted him. Adopted him? Messala repeated. By the gods, Drusus, thou dost indeed interest me. Where did the Duumvir find the boy, and who was he? Who shall answer thee that, Messala? Who but the young Ares himself? Perpul, in the fight, the Duumvir, then but a tribune, lost his galley. A returning vessel found him, and one other, all of the crew who survived, afloat upon the same plank. I give you now the story of the rescuers, which hath this excellence at least. It hath never been contradicted. They say the Duumvir's companion on the plank was a Jew. A Jew? Echoed Messala. And a slave. How, Drusus? A slave? When the two were lifted to the deck, the Duumvir was in the tribune's armor, and the other in the vesture of a rower. Messala arose from leaning against the table. A galley? He checked the debasing word, and looked around for once in his life at loss. Just then a procession of slaves filled into the room, some with great jars of wine, others with baskets of fruits and confections, others again with cups and flagons, mostly silver. There was inspiration in the sight. Instantly Messala climbed upon a stool. Men of the Tiber, he said in a clear voice, let us turn this waiting for our chief into a feast of Bacchus, whom ye choose for master. Drusus arose. Who shall be master but the giver of the feast? He said. Answer, Romans. They gave their reply in a shout. Messala took the chapelet from his head, gave it to Drusus, who climbed upon the table, and, in the view of all, solemnly replaced it, making Messala master of the night. There came with me into the room, he said, some friends just risen from the table. That our feast may have the approval of sacred custom, bring hither that one of them most overcome by wine. A din of voices answered, Here he is, here he is! And from the floor where he had fallen, a youth was brought forward, so effeminately beautiful he might have passed for the drinking god himself. Only the crown would have dropped from his head, and the thyrsus from his hand. Lift him upon the table, the master said. It was found he could not sit. Help him, Drusus, as the fair Neon may yet help thee. Drusus took the inebriate in his arms. Then, addressing the limp figure, Messala said, amidst profound silence, O Bacchus, greatest of the gods, be thou propitious tonight, propitious, and for myself and these thy votaries, I vow this chapelet. And from his head he raised it reverently. I vow this chapelet to thy altar in the grove of Daphne. He bowed, replaced the crown upon his locks, then stooped and uncovered the dice, saying with a laugh, See, my Drusus, by the donkey of Silenus, the denarius is mine. There was a shout that set the floor to quaking, and the grim Atlantis to dancing, and the orgies began. Chapter 13 is called A Driver for Ilderim's Arabs. And while I was very ambitious and thought I could get through 3 chapters, I think that it's 9:30 now, and that we must cut it for the evening. So in that last chapter, Messala is hearing about this Arius's son and who he is, and maybe he's starting to think in his head who he could be, and he may not have put 2 and 2 together quite yet, and put him as Judah ben-Hur, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So, there we go. And at that, we're going to leave you for the evening. There's a lot of talking in that one that sounds a little bit flamboyant, but it's good. The plot's moving along. I think that you're going to really like it once we get into it. And so when I watched Ben-Hur when I was a kid, like the only scene that I remembered was the chariot race, and that's coming up. It's coming up. It might be in a week or two, because this guy likes to use long words. But I think you're going to like it. All right. I'm going to finish there. Good night. Merry Christmas. We'll see you tomorrow.